This is a good life, though. This will always be indented in me.
It's a pretty rare combination to have somebody who is a priest who loves living in rural Alaska. Rural Alaska is a very challenging place, and is also a bush pilot, and can fly a plane. That is a very rare combination.
Welcome back to Mission Matters Live. I am Megan Mio, Director of the Global Mission Office, and I'm here in studio with Father Scott Garrett, priest and pastor in Western Alaska at Holy Rosary Parish in St. Paul Mission, based in Dillingham. We also have Malina Baer with us, who is a recent graduate of DePaul University with a BFA in film and television, with concentration in cinematography and a minor in documentary production. I mean, I'm like, this is a mouthful. And I mean, it's very, very unique skill set. And she has also been, for the past year, Gabriel Fellow with the Archdiocese of Chicago Office of Radio and TV. We just saw kind of a little teaser trailer for her film that she unveiled last fall. The film is called Ministry at the Edge of Alaska, and it features Father Scott. We've been talking about this connection that Malina really brought to Chicago in preparing this film, and then just introducing this topic to an audience here in the Archdiocese of Chicago and beyond of what it means to do mission at the edge of Alaska. And so we've been talking a little about both of you, your backgrounds, your stories of what drew you to ministry, to the priesthood, and to filming this type of topic. But now I want to talk a little bit more about the film itself, because sometimes I feel like the media can really, it's like a picture is for 1,000 words. That it brings up all these kind of questions and ideas. A film can really challenge us. So I thought, having the filmmaker herself right here, we could start by asking, can you tell us a little bit more about the message that you were trying to convey with your film? And, when you got to Alaska, you had something you were trying to capture, or, how did it evolve as you were filming?
Sure. So I think after contacting Father Scott and getting his okay and kind of approval that, we're going to be going on this adventure of, making a film. So I flew out to Alaska, and I really honestly, I did as much research as I could to kind of prepare to learn about like the environment, the culture, and kind of the history of this place. But that could only take me so far, because you are, venturing into a new location. I, never met Father Scott prior to kind of just showing up there, and he really introduced me to the community, which I really appreciated. He has such a strong connection with a lot of people there, and him giving me that opportunity to meet all these people, was a great avenue into starting to document this story. So I went out with kind of the idea of making this film to document his mission, and it sort of kind of transformed into what does this community kind of look like as well, and who are these people, and what is the community that they belong to. I also think a reason for making this film was the visual component of flying. I think it's visually interesting. Like Father Scott says, he serves, 100-mile radius. Yeah, you can say that, but it's different when you visually see, the places that he's traveling to, and you see the landscape. You can see the conditions that he has to fly in. Like there's footage of the snow falling. Like there's a lot of external factors that come with serving in a more isolated place. So that was something I was looking to convey, and also show people that this is a really unique ministry. Like this is, like he's out here doing this, and he's here serving people. And I really wanted to highlight that. Yeah.
Let more people be aware of it.
Yeah, because I think it's important. He's doing, great work, and he's, a lot of people that I came to encounter really appreciate his presence and are really thankful that he's there to support and provide support if needed. And yeah, it was great.
You know what you said earlier about that you kind of set out meeting Father Scott, and that then when you got there he introduced you to people, that you really kind of opened up to the community more so than you had originally planned. Not that you didn't want that necessarily, but I mean that it was something new that you discovered in doing the filming. That's fascinating. I mean, I think that is something that in my office we do think about when we talk about global mission. We are talking about remote areas at times, in the mountains, in the desert, and areas where there's very few Christians or Catholics. Something like what you experienced in Alaska, and that I think, I don't know. Sometimes I think that we rely on the leaders, and leaders are important to kind of represent that reality, but it is the whole community that comes together that makes it truly a mission or a church in that area. It's the people, and it's not just one person. So I think that's really fascinating that you kind of just naturally picked that up while you were filming. And honestly, when I saw the film, I thought to myself, well, Father Scott's not that much, not that you're not in it at all, Father Scott, but that it was less than I kind of expected in a way, because I think you realized that you heard all these voices that needed to be highlighted as well, that they all spoke so authentically about their faith. Yeah,
and there's a lot of people there that facilitate, Father Scott to help him come into these places and to, provide. So I naturally kind of saw that because there was a lot of people, and I wanted to hear their experiences too. What does it mean to live here and to have someone here that provides faith? And that's great. Yeah.
In a way, an opportunity for people to gather around somebody.
Yeah, that's also very important, a place to gather, especially when you're in a small community. There's not a lot of places for people to commune, even just to talk or to,
see what's going on. Check in. Right. So faith becomes an important thing, and I know that it's an ecumenical area as well. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. So I wonder, Father Scott, as you saw Malina filming, and you saw the final product, what were your reactions? How did you feel about what you observed?
Well, it's kind of a loaded question.
Sorry.
Well, first of all, I'd just like to say that Malina, she was out here with her dad, Dwayne, as well. And, the villages out here, they're kind of closed off. They won't let just anyone in. They have to kind of know who you are and get a feel for you. And you can't just fly into a village. If you fly into some of these villages out here, they'll meet you there and ask you who you are and what you're doing and blah, blah, blah. And so at one point I asked Malina, I had something else to do. So they flew into a small village by themselves without me there. And I was kind of hesitant to do that because when I fly into a village, I represent the Catholic Church. And the only reason they were allowed to go into the village was because they were associated with the Catholic Church. And I just wanted to make sure they were aware of that when they went in there. And they, because people, I think the trouble with the village is that a lot of missionaries would take advantage of who they were, and they would, the villagers just go out of the way to give missionaries things, and anything you ask for, you have. And so I just wanted to make sure that Malina knew that when she went into this village by herself. So we talked about that a little bit, and so they went over there and they interviewed a bunch of people, and the people there just fell in love with them. So I was really, really happy that they accepted them so well, and that they were really they used really good judgment when they were over there, when they were filming and talking, and so it's just a really good experience for everyone, I think. And that's the little church over there that used to be in King Salmon, Naknek area. And so the filming, it was a little bit hard because I don't think Malina knew exactly the equipment. It's kind of hard to carry things around in a little plane and going over to the villages and all of that. And it's kind of cumbersome. So it took them a couple of days to get used to everything. What do I need? What do I really need to take? And what's going to work and what's not going to work? And sometimes the interviews just didn't work because the gear wasn't completely right and this wasn't completely right. but for the majority of it, they got it. They finally figured out what equipment they could use in the spots that we were at,
Yeah.
and they got it all ironed out, and it worked out really well. Um, and another thing for me, I guess the setting up of the equipment was a little, I lost, my patience ran a little bit thin sometimes because of the equipment, because it takes a lot of work. I mean, I didn't realize how much work it takes to get an interview with someone, and all the lighting and all of that. And so, I wasn't really sure how that was going to work, but I got kind of used to it after a while, and it wasn't such a big deal. And so, but believe me, it's a lot of work to take all this equipment into a little airplane, take it out, get it all set up somewhere, and then move it again. And so, I mean, I was amazed at how well they did that, and it worked out really well.
Thanks to my dad. He carried a lot of the gear. He was the support system. Yeah, and that was really great. But yeah, it's a lot of work making a film. Yeah,
Right.
and especially
No
this
matter
is
where.
like a micro version of making a film. Like this is the pared down version of bringing gear. So, but we made it work, and I think it was a lot of fun. I think we had a good time.
It's also, I mean, you were talking about the earlier about how you wanted to film this topic because you were looking at unique ways that ministry happens, and that flying the plane was what drew you. It was a visual.
Yeah.
It's a little bit of a metaphor too about like being with people and being willing to travel even in dangerous places, and that the equipment for filming too, in a way, is a way, a subtle way of communicating to that community that what you're going to say is this important. I'm willing to take all the steps necessary to make sure I'm recording this properly so that I can share it with others.
Yeah.
I hope. And maybe that was why you were well accepted in the community too, because you were very intentional.
Yeah, I would say as through like my education and experience, like learning how to approach like certain topics and to be the word I'm looking for is in tune and authentic with the people that you're speaking with is essential, especially going to a place that you're unfamiliar with and having to establish trust with the people that you're interviewing and you're speaking to. Like a camera is a tool. It can be used in a bad way. You have to recognize that there is kind of power in like filming, because you're representing a community and you don't want to represent a community incorrectly, and you want to go with an authentic, and a open mind. Yeah. So that was something, and I appreciated Father Scott's approach as well to that. He's very, cognizant and open-minded.
Yeah, and you mentioned, Father Scott, that the community is cautious because they have had bad experiences with missionaries and other visitors.
Yeah.
Which is something, we certainly hear about when I talk with other missionaries as well, that there have been many times when we have failed in our mission, and so that's certainly understandable. You have to be very sensitive, and particularly when you're outside of your own comfort zone, your own, what you know, where you come from.
Yeah.
So that was wise, very wise. Well, I know that the other two fellows film things here in the Chicagoland area, so you had like an extra kind of challenge to the work that you were doing.
Bringing gear to a new place. Meeting new people.
Really out of your comfort zone. Which in my mind really does, again, as I've been making these connections, speak to this missionary life and what it means to do ministry in remote places, is really a core to this understanding of what it means to be a missionary. So I wonder, Father Scott, if you could talk about yourself and your ministry as missionary work. Do you talk about it that way often?
Yeah. Well, the missionary work it's not what a lot of people think it is. When I first came out here, I knew I wanted to be out here and be a missionary, but I thought it was going to be like, I'd go to Dillingham, get settled into the parish, and people from these villages would start figure out that they knew there was a Catholic priest around, so they would call you and ask you if you could come out to their village and do a mass. I had all these visions of, this is how it's going to work, and it was nothing like that at all. What you have to do as a missionary is you have to actually go out and and contact the people. And so what I would do when I first came out here, I flew into pretty much every one of these villages, and I just walked around and I tried to figure out if there were Catholics. I'd like walk into a school and kind of introduce myself, and then maybe a Catholic would come up to me and said, "Oh yeah, it'd be great if we could have a mass here, blah, blah, blah." And that's how it works. I mean, you have to go after them.
Right.
And I think part of the reason why they don't, even if they know you're there, they don't want to call you up because it's so expensive to fly into some of these villages. And I think they kind of feel bad about having someone come all the way out there and then maybe not being able to pay for it or something like that. So that's an issue, I think. And so what I have to do is make sure that they know that, I'm coming out there to serve them, and, I have a budget and it's paid for and all of that.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that's kind of where that issue stands. And so, yeah. And so after you get to know people and to fly into the villages, you kind of figure out where they are. But then after you figure out where everyone is, it's like some of them, like some of the teachers that are there, the Forest Service workers, they're on or the hospital workers in certain areas or the medical clinics. They're only there for a couple of years, right? So they'll move. Then they'll move to another village. And then you got to track them down and figure out where they went. And then you got to fly it back in there. And it just is, it's not as easy as you think to find the Catholics, and especially in this mission that I'm at. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and it is diverse. I think you mentioned briefly, but it's in the film as well, that it's religiously diverse area. There are different ethnic, racial identities. There's people with different generations, kids and older adults. And in some ways, it's like any diocese, any parish community where people, gather around the sacraments, or they're looking to continually learn and be formed in their faith. But at the same time, all these kinds of challenges that you just identified make those times sometimes a little bit, they're more spread out, or some of those lines and those categories just disappear, because when you have an opportunity to gather and pray together, you just take it. It doesn't matter if it's Catholic or not. It doesn't matter if it's in a nice building or not. We're here and we're going to take advantage of this opportunity. Father Scott's here, so we're going to go and see him. Is that true?
That is very true. When I go to, especially, I'll just use Clark's Point as an example because I go there quite a bit. It's about 10 air miles from here, but it's the only way you can get there is to fly over there. So it takes me about a few minutes to get there. But when I go into there, I don't, every person, I usually have a person, usually it used to be Judy George. I think she just might have recently moved. But what happens is she'll call up everyone in the village, whether they're Catholic, Moravian, Russian Orthodox, or just any faith at all. Sure. And she'll tell them that I'm coming in, and I'll tell them, when I'm going to be there. And then they'll all meet in the little community center there. And the Catholics will come up for communion, and the non-Catholics, they'll just come up and I'll give them a blessing. But yeah, they're kind of starving for the faith, actually, and for any kind of spirituality at all. A lot of the villagers are just, they're kind of lost. They're very lost, and it's kind of a sad thing to see. Especially, I wish I could get to these villages more often, but it's almost impossible to do that because it's such a vast, spread out area.
Yeah. Such a challenge.
So, yeah.
I'm reminded again, too, for folks who go on short-term mission experiences, they're able to just go for a week or 2 weeks, shorter time. Sometimes the question is like, well, what can I do in just a short period of time? Or, what does it mean that I'm coming out here to see with people? And yes, it is a short time, and of course an extended experience of living with people like Father Scott does is different. He has a very different, deeper relationship with the communities that he sees more often, or at least connects with more often, if not in person. But at the same time, there's something to be said about presence and about like your willingness to go. As I said, that Malina, you were willing to travel that distance to kind of go outside of your comfort zone, to bring all that equipment, and to say, I want to tell, speak on your behalf, but I want to be as accurate as possible and give you my attention and my time. That can be a type of gift, especially given what Father Scott just said about the community having a lot of questions and concerns. Would you say that that's really what struck you and kind of helped you to adjust your plan for the film?
Yeah, I think you're right about that. That's the once you kind of get into the community and you see how people interact, and I think that's where my focus kind of shifted, because it feels like the community is also with, like, it's Father Scott and the community is kind of what I came to see. You know, like he's integral in all these people's lives, because this is their person there. You know, and they connect with him. So I wanted to highlight those things.
Yeah, I think sometimes it's interesting when we were just talking about this filming here today, like you put a camera in front of somebody and then you start to act differently. But in a way, you get the truth out of people in a way too, when you're asking them those questions kind of directly, that they reflect out loud and can say, you know, this really does mean a lot to us. We're so glad that we have Father Scott here.
Yeah, and everyone that I spoke to was really open and just gave me their time, and that was so great. And they had wonderful things to say. Yeah, it was nice.
Wonderful. Well, we'll talk again in just a moment about the film, so that our listeners can look for that as well, because the message of the film, again, you have to experience it in order to really see what we're talking about here. There's not a ton of dialogue. It's not all about the words. You know, it is really about the presence and the personalities. But it's time for another pause, so we're going to just take a little break here, but we invite you to come back for part 3 of our discussion about mission and ministry at the edge of Alaska. So stay tuned and come right back.